Hello again, this is Alister McGrath at Oxford University, introducing yet another short presentation on issues in science and religion. These are very informal. I'm not actually using a script, I'm just talking for the camera. And I think it's very helpful just to have somebody walk you through a field and give you an informal sketch map of its landscape so that you can follow it through in more detail in your own time. In this presentation, I want to reflect on the importance of meaning in human life, and to think with you about the role of science and religious faith in helping us to explore this question. Let's begin then with a quote from the novelist Jeanette Winterson, and she wrote these words, which I think are very good to get our thinking about the meaning of life underway. Here's what she wrote. "We cannot simply eat, sleep, hunt, and reproduce. We are meaning-seeking creatures." I think it's a great quote. It kind of gives us a very good summary of what seems to be a very general human characteristic, which is that facts aren't enough. We want to go deeper and explore what things mean and what we mean. And the point here is that facts are indeed the raw material of knowledge, but they need to be interpreted and their significance understood. We need a way of seeing reality which makes sense of these observations and yet goes beyond those observations. And the point is, it's not facts about nature, but the bigger pictures of our world and ourselves that result from these, which generate both moral values and an understanding of what the meaning of life is. Now, the whole area of meaning is widely discussed in literature and wider culture, as well as in some scientific circles, especially, of course, psychology. And empirical psychology has highlighted how important the question of meaning is to our well-being. It's as if we as human beings are psychologically programmed to yearn to find a big picture, which helps us to feel that we are part of something that's greater than ourselves. Now, science can certainly help us to identify what sort of things people find meaningful, and that's very important. But listen, it's not the same as telling us what the meaning of life is. It's one thing to say people find these things meaningful. It's another to say this is what the meaning of life is. And that's not a scientific question. Meaning isn't something that we can observe or measure. It's not really something that we can investigate or read off using some kind of scientific toolkit. So what does this idea of meaning really convey? Well, I'm going to quote you from the psychologist Michael Steger, who gives us what I think is a very helpful answer. And he suggests that the notion of meaning in life could be described like this. Listen to what he says. "The extent to which people comprehend, make sense of, or see significance in their lives, accompanied by the degree to which they perceive themselves to have a purpose, mission, or overarching aim in life." Now, I think that's quite a helpful way of getting our conversation underway, because it's almost as if human beings actively seek for systems of meaning which embrace an understanding of this world, but also help us to see that we are part of something that is bigger. And psychology isn't telling us what the meaning of life is, but it certainly helps us to understand what human beings find meaningful and the difference that this makes to human existence. For example, those who believe that they can see meaning in traumatic events seem much more likely to survive them and may even grow as a result of them. The meaning of life, I think, is one of many questions which seem to transcend science's capacity to answer. So you might think of Karl Popper's idea of ultimate questions. And for Popper, ultimate questions are things like, what is the point of life? What is the good? Things that are really important, but science actually is not able to answer. And that's not a problem for science. Science just wasn't designed to answer these questions. But religious faith is different because it does play a significant role in generating frameworks of meaning and value, which help us to make sense of our world and our lives. Now, here's how the philosopher Keith Yandel describes this characteristic explanatory or sense-making aspect of religion. I think his approach here is very useful. Listen to what he says. "Our religion is a conceptual system that provides an interpretation of the world and the place of human beings in it, bases an account of how life should be lived given that interpretation, and expresses this interpretation and lifestyle in a set of rituals, institutions, and practices." So I think that's a very helpful way of thinking about this whole question of meaning. Helps us to see how religion creates a bigger picture of reality, which helps us to understand what is good and what things are all about. But there is a question here which I think is quite important. Do we discern meaning within our world, or do we simply invent it, make up what we want to be the case? C.S. Lewis, for example, argued that, and I quote him here, we are not reading rationality into an irrational universe, but responding to a rationality with which the universe has always been saturated. But others would disagree. Some would say, Nancy Cartwright, for example, is a good example, that we impose order or rationality or meaning on reality when there's actually nothing there in the first place. For Lewis, we're responding to the way the universe is. For Cartwright, we're projecting our own desires onto that universe. But here's a good question to ask. What human needs does religious faith seem to engage and satisfy? And in what I have to say was a very perceptive 1990 lecture at Cambridge University, the novelist Salman Rushdie argues that religion meets three types of needs that are not satisfied by secular rationalist materialism. First of all, it enables us to articulate our sense of awe and wonder, partly by helping us to grasp the immensity of life, and partly by affirming that actually we are special. Secondly, it provides what Rushdie calls answers to the unanswerable. It enables us to engage deep questions that often trouble and perplex us, particularly about meaning and value. And finally, it offers us a moral framework within which we can live out the good life. And for Rushdie, religion, or the idea of God, provides us with, and I quote him here, a repository of our awestruck wonderment of life and an answer to the great questions of existence. So I guess the question really here is, how do we weave science and religion together? Because although some suggest that science and religion are incompatible, it just seems to me they're different. They're coming at things from different angles, and we can find ways of bringing them into meaningful conversation with each other. I personally think they can both be integrated into a deeper and richer vision of reality. They represent, if you like, different ways of understanding our world, which results from using different methods. But this difference does not imply inconsistency or warfare or incompatibility. It just means science and religion are different, leaving us to work out how to bring them together in a meaningful dialogue. And as I mentioned earlier, scientific and religious maps are different, but they can help us to build up a richer understanding of ourselves and our world. And that's why I think Mary Midgley's ideas of multiple mapping of reality are very, very helpful. We have a scientific map, we have a religious map, and we try to superimpose these and harvest the information that results. It allows us to discover meaning and value and not just understand how things work. Now, obviously, there's a lot more that needs to be said about science and ethics, and we're going to come on to that in the next presentation. I'm going to explore with you whether science is able to determine moral values. I look forward to explaining that question with you and talking to you again very soon. Thank you so much for listening.